consisting of myself, Ade Rizky Purnamasari, Khofifatus Sa'adah, Nurul, Fadlilah, Silva, and Siti Nurhamidah. We are going to present the material of Chapter 4, 1,000 Little Questions from the book Raffles and the British Invasion of Java by Tim Hannigan. And this is for the subject for the University, English History and Literature. So, in most of Indonesia's great past, the background story of the royal courts of Central Java is hidden. The Yogyakarta of MC Redcliffe's under Sultan Mangkubumi 1749 to 1792 is especially detailed, drawing on both Dutch and Javanese sources and explaining the context of Mataram's partition as well. So, people in Javanese land back then were not used to the arrival of English people, and the departure of the Dutch was largely a matter of mere curiosity for the commoners. No one was more eager than the royals to look at an Englishman, and at 10 a.m. on September 22nd, just a few days after Jan Willem Janssens had signed to the Dutch Java to the British, they got their chance. And then in the early 1500s, the long Hindu-Buddhist centuries in Java had given way as the mighty of Majapahit Empire fell to the Demak's burgeoning Islamic force. And among the warlords and chancellors who rattled through the rice fields, like the royal lustre, was also difficult to discern for much of the following century. But then, sometime in the 1570s, between the fiery peak of Merapi Mountain and the stormy shores of the Southern Ocean, a young Javanese noble named Senopati, the son of the ruler of a minor fiefdom occupying the fertile Central Java's territory, began to look for spiritual powers. But in reality, under Senopati's grandson, Sultan Agung, the historical Mataram rose to its apogee, making the kingdom, shine as brightly as the spark that had first burned above his forefathers' head. And then he spread his rule to include almost all of Java in the first half of the 17th century, coming up short only against the western domain of Baton and the little orange boil of Batavia, where the Dutch were digging canals between their malaria birds. And then the Mataram dynasty, descended from Senopati and Sultan Agung, remained the watchword of this Muslim Javanese duality. But while the kingdom survived, it lost its shine over the centuries. The capital of the kingdom, original site to Kartasura in the interest of an auspicious new start. And then a charge position on the axis between the mighty volcanoes of Merapi and Lau. So the reform failed to stem the uprisings, and the court upped stakes once more. However, though, just a few decades later, in 1746, and was shunted 7 miles east of the village of Sala. So the sacred banyan trees that pin the alun-alun, the royal square, were uprooted and moved to this new city of Surakarta, a city that would endure not only the unified Mataram but also European rule in Java. One that no one really wanted at the time was the ultimate compromise solution to the chronic instability in Mataram, but which was to have unexpected consequences. So Nicholas Harti, governor of the VOC's North Coast territories and point of touch with the Mataram court, brokered a peace agreement on 13th February 1755 at a misty, muddy spot called Gianti, perched high on the slopes of Mount Lau. And then it saw the kingdom break in two. So then there was no one but two royal courts holding sway over the hinterlands by the time the British arrived in Java, amounting to what one observer described as the Perth, the sinews, and the Java power. And the initial English emissary was about to make their acquaintance on 22nd of September 1811. So when they visited the Javanese courts, an earlier generation of Dutchmen paid at least lip service to all this procedure. The court linguistic formulas were normally followed by those who could speak Japanese, and while they balked to actual groveling, they generally managed to keep their heads below the ruler's level. So the Japanese have always considered Europeans to be the strangest of all races. They appeared to regard the Dutchmen as clowns by drawing on the allegory Latin wealth of the wayang kulit, the sacred shadowy puppet shows of classical Java. So, by contrast, the European part of the city, north of Alun-Alun, didn't do well. So the Dutch had never really managed to take the measure of Yogyakarta, and they failed to grasp, let alone orchestrate, let alone events within the Kraton under both Mangkunagara and Hamengkubuwono II. But still, on one side of the main approach road to the court, they had managed to construct a very fine official residence and a small fortress with grey walls and shuttered barracks on the other. Yeah, so I think that's all I can explain. The next part will be explained by Khofifatus Sa'adah. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Khofifatus Sa'adah. The following morning, he met both the ruler and the crown prince face to face, and noted that they were very jealous of each other. In Surakarta reborn, Kutu was user them of the friendly nature of the British newcomers. To suggest that they complete a letter to the Governor General listing their concerns. Robison's brief journey had been a hard one, and he was full of ideas by the time he reached the coast. He had also made plenty of other useful observations, including keen assessment about which Dutch officials were trustworthy and which were otherwise. But Minto would soon return to India, and Robinson was setting himself up for all sorts of difficulties with his new superior. Raffles, it seemed, had taken a profound dislike to Robinson from the first, and it's not entirely held to work out why the two men were radically alike. But the ambition, both the idea and opinions, and were quite happy to voice them openly, and both were quite happy to invent authority for themselves whenever circumstances allowed it. And when Robinson was later appointed Assistant Secretary to the British government of Java, his new boss did his utmost to make life intolerable for him. Robinson was certainly somewhat difficult to handle, but Lord Minto, a candid time-server 16-years-old Governor General rather than an insecure 13-years-old upstart, talked highly of his ability and remained sympathetic to him throughout the difficult years ahead. The obvious antipathy that Raffles felt for Robinson and the variole that he and his immediate later poured upon him were entirely unfair. An official British proclamation had already informed the old Duchess Brookhurst of Batavia that provenance brought to them a protecting a benevolent government. Most of them did seem willing to give the British newcomers the benefit of the doubt, but on the social side things were not going entirely smoothly. By early 19th century, Batavia and the other big colonial city of Java were home to a large community of mixed-race Indo-Europeans. It was from their rank that colonial wives were usually drawn. Girls were wedded off at shockingly young age. Children of 12 or 13 were considered marriable. The discovery of this state of affairs in 1811 left these upright English folk deeply distressed. If Raffles was charged with appeal tax in bringing the principle of good British governance to the island of Java, then his wife will face no less of the challenge in the setting of a new series of feminist standards. cultural difference aside, the British were already making swift program around Batavia. Even before Jason formally capitulated, Lord Minto has battered out the first ad hoc new legislation in the form of a proclamation. The first and most eye-catching of their adjustment pronounced that neither torture nor mutilation shall make part of any sentence to be pronounced against criminal. And in the early 19th century stand, anti-slavery sentiment was very much de rigueur for upgrade British liberal, among whose rank Lord Minto certainly counted himself. William Wilberforce's decade-long campaign had come to fruition in 1807 with the Slave Trade Act, and during the preparation of the British invasion of Java, Minto and Raffles made a good deal of noise about fearing the slaves of the Dutch East Indies. Slavery could clearly not be abolished at once. It was declared, and in any case, the 1807 Act outlines only the trending of slaves in Britain's domain, not the practice itself. Finally, Raffles was appointed who would sit at the head of a four-man council made up of his military counterpart and a pair of negotiation Dutchmen, H. W. Mountain, the former head of the Batavia Supreme Court, and a future close collaboration of Raffles and the ex-chief alderman Jacob William Prince. Meanwhile, Roland Gillespie had been made the commander of the force, the chief of the British Army in Java, the second most important man on the council. Lord Minto could scarcely have chosen two less compatible people to head an enormously challenging new administration. One a bruising aristocratic war veteran, the other a wildly ambitious of somewhat insecure young middle-class civilian, and neither of them with any real experience of government. He did make note of a shade of dissatisfaction in the military quarter at the time, and was eager to make provision in the instruction to prepare colonies, depots, and discounted. Raffles had already recognized that the double-headed Mataram dynasty amounted to much more than a pair of petty fiefdoms. It was Raffles who would make the decisive move. His name was John Crawford. Crawford was older comet Orientalist, and he earned a good deal of popularity in the Yogyakarta as a question. Crawford made this clear as soon as he had moved into the gloomy Dutch residence. Got himself banned from the inner sanctum of the Kraton, from his decidedly rogue and distinctly uncouth behavior. The situation was critical. It was time for Raffles himself to make a journey to the east.
Raffles then started his journey to the east of Java on November 28 with Olivian traverse. He later arrived at Surakarta on December 21. He made a deal with the Sultanate of Surakarta, which is Mangkunegaran, to make a friendship with him. He did it, and then he spent Christmas in Surakarta before he go out to the Yogyakarta. In Yogyakarta, he wanted the same. He wanted to take a contract with the Sultanate of Yogyakarta, which is known as Hamengkubuwono II. When he got there, the situation was so different. It is full of tents and really different than Surakartans do. He felt upset when he met the Sultan. Because of what? Because of he felt angry because of his chair had been set lower than the Sultan's. In Surakarta, Raffles had been regarded as an ally rather than a subordinate. The Raffles is offered the contract with the Sultan, and the Sultan disagreed with it. With full of ego, Raffles go away. Unfortunately, Hamengkubuwono had been fallen to the Raffles' hand on 1812. He and his troops and their assistants from Mangkunegaran of Surakarta succeed to push out the Yogyakarta Sultanate, and then sultans of Yogyakarta agree with the Raffles agreement. Move to another story. A rumor had been spreaded that Sultan Badruddin of Palembang ordered his troops to expel, even kill the Dutch from Palembang. Was that the truth, or there was any Raffles role in it? Let's see. Back on Malacca, Raffles ever sent two local agents named Tuanku Raden Sharif Muhammad and Sayyid Abu Bakar Rumi to carry up the messages to Sultan Badruddin on December 1810. Raffles opened the correspondence with deliberate in attempt to scare Sultan Badruddin. Raffles offered that he could move the Dutch up even were they 10,000 in number of people. And then the replies from Palembang were never as regular as Malacca did. At first, Sultan Badruddin suspected the agents of Raffles, and then Raffles remained panicked. At March 1811, Raffles moved to Batavia and sent another mail to Badruddin for the sake of contract. That mail was full of words that vilified the Dutch, and it was not successful yet until he sent another mail and gift box contains of 4 cases of 80 muskets in all and 10 baskets of cartridge filled with powder and shot. Why Raffles so ambitious, and why Raffles want the Dutch move away from Palembang? Because the motive was clear. Raffles want Belitung Island, which richest source of tin in all Indies at the time. And then, to respond to the rumor, at first the rumor had been spread later, Raffles read on his letter to Lord Minto on January 1812 that Sultan Badruddin portrayed as a villain, a criminal who allowed the Dutch to be cut off and murdered. That's the main.
Okay, I wanna continues Nurul Rizky explain about our presentation. Raffles want to take Bangka. He break with Sultan Badruddin. Eventually, he think must break with him. Sultan Badruddin blocked up his several hundred men, and 11 sweeps were prepared as the rain rattled down over Batavia Bay. From Pulau Nangka, it took them another 5 days creeping up the channel to reach the mouth of the Musi. Captain John mentioned the willing regard for the interests of humanity which always distinguished the British character, and claimed that it had such a shocking effect that the inhabitants assumed confidence, and many who had fled into the woods returned to their homes. This is contradicted somewhat by the records of Gilead's actual letter and proclamation. On 7th April, he was compelled to declare that it is with pain the general commanding the British force observes that the natives are alarmed and have no confidence in the English and are fleeing in all directions. It tried to assure them that their property will be safe and their wives and families will be respected, and nothing but hastily on their part can provoke it on ours. On 1 May, a rumor did the rounds of a race conflagration. Various reports were circulated of a body of Malays having resolved upon running amok, which is a desperate custom peculiar to these people, wrote Captain Thorne. Clearly, all natives looked alike to the road cause. The men they had attacked included the Arab who had kindly conducted them into Palembang. On the night of 25 April, and the men they were about to place on the throne, Prince Adipati, As a result of this monumental blunder of the kind that still seems to occur all too often in Akom countries today. Officers who helped conquer Cornelis fortress, attacked Palembang, Surakarta, and looted the Yogyakarta palace later had an argument with Raffles. The trigger was a military budgetis. Raffles wanted to reduce the military presence in Java, while Galeps wanted to ask for additional funding for the military. As a result, the two figures were at odds. Thank you.